I've got two guns. One is named right gun, and the other one's named left gun. It's time to dualies. Hey, Mom, look what I can do. Whoa, I'm so cool. Hey there, gamers, it's time for Weapon Select, and today we are covering the Dualies. The Dualies are a relatively complicated weapon class. There are a lot of different factors that you have to take into consideration looking at the differences of them. There are 5 different types of Dualies, and in order to discuss how they differ, we're going to have to first talk a little bit about the mechanics of Dualies and how they work. So, by default, you have 2 reticles in front of you instead of 1 because there's a weapon in each hand, and the shots will alternate from one to the other like this. This creates a little bit more of a paint trail than you would have with a single weapon, and we can compare what it would look like with a single weapon in a second. And while that's a relatively decent kill time, this is a lot worse. And this is one huge weakness of using dual reticle mode, that your accuracy is effectively made worse because you would need to get both reticles onto the target instead of only having one on in order to do max DPS, max damage per second. Fortunately, you do have a way to exit this mode, so while this is going to be better for painting, when you get into a combat situation, you're going to want instead to dodge roll. This is executed by firing, holding a direction, and then pressing the B button, the jump button. And you do that all very quickly, all at once, so it just looks like that. But that's 3 different inputs. That's the direction you want to roll, that's the jump button, and the fire button. And once you've got all of those down, then you will do a dodge roll in the direction that you indicate. Now, the dodge roll has a bunch of different properties we need to talk about. One of them is that, as we've mentioned before, it changes your weapon from dual reticle to single reticle. Now there's only one. Another factor is that it gives you perfect accuracy on the shots that you're firing in dual reticle mode. There's not that much aim RNG on the dual reticle shots, but you can see if you hold it down, especially for a pretty long time, they are jumping around just the tiniest bit. They're not perfectly accurate. But when you dodge roll, they are at 100% perfect accuracy. They are going exactly where you fire. You can look at this. This is a laser that I am firing right here. They are just going to go exactly to the spot that I'm aiming at. Another thing that's a little bit more subtle about them is that they are actually coming out of the weapon faster. This is a faster kill time that you have out of a dodge roll, even than hitting both of these shots at once. So that's an added advantage of this. One last advantage of the dodge rolls is that it gives you a burst of movement that you do not need your own ink to be able to take advantage of. In fact, you can dodge roll through enemy ink and get there just fine. If you're trying to walk through enemy ink, you're going to get stopped and you're going to go, I can't move. But with the dodge rolls, you just kind of zip in there, and it's a way that you can engage on an enemy player who would normally be inaccessible to just about any other weapon. Now, the big disadvantage of the dodge rolls is that you are going to get locked into position in this turret mode state for a certain amount of time before you're going to be able to move again. So if I just mash the dodge roll, so this is going to be dodge rolling as fast as I possibly can, you'll notice that every 2 of them I just kind of freeze in place like this. This is going to happen even if I stop firing. So I'll stop firing, and I'll hold ZL, and you'll see that there's just a second where I'm just sitting there, even though I'm holding ZL already, where I can't do anything. That window of vulnerability is something that you need to be very careful not to let your opponents punish, because sitting still for that long in this game is often a huge problem. When you're in combat, you're a sitting duck effectively. You're a pretty large target, and it's your kill time versus theirs at that point. So you never want to be stuck in that dodge roll when you're in range of an opponent and they're trying to fight you. So with most dualies, that means that you have 2 dodge rolls, and then you're going to have to be safe for at least, you know, that fraction of a second there so that you can get back into the ink and move around again. With the Tetras, it's actually 4 rolls instead of 2, and we'll get to that shortly. But for most weapons, you need to get that fight finished by the 2nd dodge roll in order for what you do next to be safe. So that should cover the basic mechanics of the weapon. You can do things like squid roll into the dodge rolls. That's a pretty common tactic. So you can kind of like be swimming up to an encounter, squid roll, and then dodge roll a couple times, and use that to try and mix an opponent up and throw them off. That's something that you'll see a lot. But otherwise, until we get into specific types of dualies, that's all of the mechanics that we need to know about. These are the vanilla dualies. These are a relatively niche weapon in competitive play. There are only so many cases where you would prefer these, because right now the Splash-O-Matic is the premier crab tank user in the game. And so because it paints so quickly for crab, because it's got the perfect accuracy all the time and not just when it's dodge rolling, because it has a burst bomb, which is a really useful poking tool that the Splat Dualies don't have. When you're thinking about when you would want to run vanilla dualies, you're kind of thinking, okay, well, why would I run these and not the Splash-O-Matic? And really the only answer you've got there is the dodge rolls, unless you really need a suction bomb instead of a burst bomb. And the reason you might want the dodge rolls is to be able to dive the enemy team. There was a weapon comp that I saw used by a top Japanese team where they ran vanilla dualies in conjunction with Tetra Dualies. Now, Tetras, we'll talk about, are very, very aggressive. And they wanted a weapon that had crab tank, but they also wanted a front line that was able to dive with the Tetras, that was able to approach enemy ink in the way that dualies can. And so the vanilla dualies was actually preferable in that situation. Most of the time, though, you're just not going to see these that much in competitive play because of the popularity of the Splash-O-Matic specifically, and that weapon just being generally one of the biggest competitive choices right now. A lot of teams are running 2 of that weapon, and since this weapon competes with it, it's not in as good of a place as it could be. But it's still a perfectly viable option, and if you like the dualies and you want a crab tank, this is, you know, a phenomenal option for you on your team. The bomb, not too much more to say about it. It's great for defensive potential, so you can kind of sit back on the back lines and throw these onto the tower, or to throw them in front of the Rainmaker to stall the match until your team is able to get back, and you can kind of shark in and get something done with the main weapon. Dualies in general, the short-range dualies anyway, the aggressive ones, are going to be largely kind of sharking weapons. They can paint pretty well for themselves if they need to, but it's much better for them to be able to just pop out and delete someone like that as quickly as they can, or to dive into enemy ink when you're not expecting someone to be that far forward, and for them to be able to get picks that way. These are relatively short-ranged weapons, and so the same rules about playing around cover applies to all of the first 3 weapons we're going to be talking about here, the Dapples, Vanilla Dualies, and the Tetras. Something you'll notice as we're rolling out here is that I'm not going to be using the dodge rolls. The dodge rolls are not faster for movement in the long term. They give you a short burst, but again, that stop that you're forced to do, that slows you down a lot. So we're only going to use the dodges for movement when we need to maybe cross enemy ink or throw someone's aim off really quickly. Now, they were committed and I actually could have gotten them there, but works out. All right. Team did really well there, and we're going to try and set up over here. Something that you can do if you need to is use the dodge roll to get over the grates like that, because it will be faster than just walking. They're going to roll off the ledge. That's a common mistake for early Dualies players, just not knowing how far that's going to go. Power of Crab Tank. that super jump to? Oh, I did not think that I couldn't take another hit of that. The Wave Breaker is something that is uniquely dangerous to Dualies, because you stay grounded while you're rolling. There is no jumping unless you want to leave turret mode. So that's something you've got to watch out for. That if there's a Wave Breaker out, strongly consider just ending your turret mode and trying to keep yourself alive, because taking too many hits of that is generally going to be lethal. Moving on to another short-range Dualies, we're going to talk about the Dapples here. Now, the Dapples are significantly shorter range. This isn't even going to be hitting. This is one of the shortest ranged weapons in the entire game. This actually gets outranged by the Sploosh, believe it or not. So you're almost in melee range just to be able to hit them with this in the first place. It's really crazy short-ranged. And that's one of its biggest weaknesses, really, that it doesn't have a lot that it can do against a weapon that's further away from it. If it had a burst bomber or something like that, it could poke from this range, but it's just got to get super close to be able to do anything about it. The kit of these that is going to have Torpedo that is coming out, the Dapple Nouveau, we look forward to those eagerly as Dapples players, because that is probably going to be a preferable kit to this one most of the time. Now, let's talk about what this weapon does have. This weapon's DPS is bonkers. It's one of the few things that you can really reliably just deal fast damage to Kohazuna with in Salmon Run. If you get on top of someone with these weapons, you should just always win that fight, because you're more mobile than them. These rolls are basically teleports, they're so fast. It's really just kind of guesswork. You can't really track them super well. And the DPS is just insane. The problem with the weapon is getting that close in the first place, which is something that strong players generally don't tend to let happen to them very often. This particular kit is very supportive rather than aggressive. It has beacons, which will let it jump into, behind enemy lines or wherever else if it gets the opportunity to jump to them. But the stronger teams get, the better they start to get at dealing with the beacons. So over time, that sort of strategy of like living in the enemy base, it's not that it's impossible. You do still see it. There was even a high-level match played in Japan where the tournament winners were running Dapples for a lot of their matches, but it gets a lot harder. It's not easy mode like a lot of people would hope it is. The Tacticooler, you're generally going to use pretty selfishly on this weapon. You're going to use the Tacticooler because you got a beacon behind enemy lines over here, and then you super jumped to it, and as soon as you dropped, you threw a Tacticooler out, and for one thing, you're very safe right here, actually. There's not a lot that can actually hit you. But also, now you can turbo feed, and maybe even jump back into that beacon if they don't clear it before they're done dealing with you. And so that's something that you can try and do. You can try and live in their walls and be a rat. But like I said, the short range of this weapon is a huge liability and is a reason that you don't see it very frequently in competitive play. Although it may be that we have underestimated the weapon a little bit, again, as we have seen some use of it in top-level Japanese play, if not in North American or Eastern play, or European play at all. Well, this is a lot of backline and not a lot of front line, but it is a good friend of mine, Femi, former teammate, on Hydra here, so that's kind of nice. Oh boy. I'm also not looking forward to the fact that this is on splat zones, because this is really not that good of a painting weapon. Wait, is that actually Kyo? Oh my god, I think that's actually Kyo. Alright, well. That's going to be challenging. So one thing about this weapon in zones, while it does have a good fire rate, it does not actually paint that well, because it doesn't have very much range. So, for one thing, you cannot just sit in one place and paint the whole zone. You have to get really close to it. For another thing, you're not really putting that much paint down in the first place. I'm going to throw this here in part as cover, and in part because now we can turbo feed! And we're back in like 4 seconds, and we can jump to one of our own beacons. Hi, Kyo. Please go away. You are scary. Okay. Turbo feed! Aha! Did enough damage that they were able to finish them off with the Booyah Bomb. And that should get them to... Is Sayonara... Really? Are we playing with Sun and Kyo at the same time? Good lord. It's 2 top-level players. We're gonna just kind of get what we can out of this. Leaders down, that's already a huge help. They need to cap the zone here. I've hit them a couple of times. We got them. We might be able to save that. Wow, I think we actually win the game. Holy moly. Are those guys actually the real deal? I was not paying attention to the enemy splash tags when we started that. Well, that was a game. I'm talking about how this weapon's like, it's not that good, and that was with Kyo and Sun, and I'm told also Leafy and Q. Those are all top players that were playing together, and granted, they're not on their main weapons, but I am impressed that we were able to pull off what we were able to pull off there, given the weapon comp and everything. Okay, next we're moving on to the Tetra Dualies. Tetras are a weapon that has a very similar playstyle to what it had in Splatoon 2, namely that it's going to feed. Well, that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but let's talk about what these things do first. So Tetra Dualies, as the name would have you understand, Tetra means 4, so they roll 4 times before they have to stop instead of twice. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're frozen. 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Something that is also unique to this weapon is that instead of only starting to fire once the roll has ended, these weapons actually fire a couple of shots mid-roll. If I can get this just right, there we can probably see a little bit. Even before I'm done moving, shots are coming out of the weapon. So what Tetras tend to do with their multiple rolls and their ability to hit mid-roll is they'll kind of strafe around a player with the dodge rolls. They'll do this sort of thing. Back and forth like this, making themselves difficult to hit. Just repositioning anywhere that you would want to as a shooter, but they're able to fire at the same time. And so, even though they actually have a significantly slower kill time than the dualies we've talked about so far, they make up for it by being able to move and shoot at the same time, and still having a pretty decent fire rate. They do 4-shot like the Splat Dualies do. We saw that the Dapple Dualies are going to 3-shot. These ones are a 4-shot, but they also have significantly more range than the other Dualies do. You can see here I'm hitting from further away than you typically can with even the vanilla Splat Dualies. And so that is also an advantage. Against shorter ranged weapons, the Tetra Dualies can just kite you. They can just back up and dodge roll. Maybe what they'll do against something like a splatter shot is roll in to make you think that you can get into range and then back up. So do this sort of thing and try to get the splatter shot to overcommit into your range and then splat them that way. Because you don't beat the splatter shot in the DPS race, but you do beat it in terms of range and in mobility while firing. So those are your advantages that you have to use there. This weapon, because of its ability to roll that many times and its skill at winning fights, this is a hyper aggressive weapon. Arguably the single most aggressive weapon in the entire game. Because with this weapon, you are just going to dive into enemy ink a lot of the time. You're going to start from as close to the enemy as you can get, and then you're just going to dodge roll in and get on top of them right away. You're going to close all this distance with all of the rolls and use all of these to win fights with your superior movement and your relatively fast kill time. In setting up plays like this, you do have a couple of tools at your disposal. Obviously, you do have the Reef Slider, which can be used to try and close distance, although you are very vulnerable after it's done, and a lot of the time, you know, if you've got like an E-leader or something, it's just going to shoot you out of the end of that if you don't get them with the Reef Slider itself. So that's not quite as reliable an engage technique as just rolling forward. And you're often just not going to have the special anyway, because you're going to die a lot. You run a lot of quick respawn to offset that. But then you've also got Bomb. This little guy will show you where the enemy team is. Now, obviously, if you're standing up like this and throwing the bomb, you're making yourself a little visible. They're able to see where the bomb came from. But if you can get that up somewhere where it can give you information, then maybe you can shark your way in and start doing stuff like this. So, very aggressive weapon, very fun, but also extremely difficult. This is one of the most mechanically intensive weapons in the game because it benefits immensely from you being able to keep your aim on even while you are dodge rolling around someone. And that's just not an easy thing to do for anybody, even somebody who's practiced it quite a bit. So generally, people who play Tetras tend to one-trick them and just kind of master the blade on that one weapon and then take that into every map mode that they play. And their team is probably going to play really heavily around that. They're probably going to run a lot of paint, because the Tetras don't paint a ton, particularly because they're generally going to just dive in without having to paint first, and they're going to die a lot. But they do tend to get a decent amount of paint if they're playing well, because they're pushing into enemy lines and putting down a lot of shots in territory that is very painted by the enemy team. And so rather than painting over their like redundant ink, they're not going to paint over something their teammate has already painted. They're going to be painting the enemy base with the shots that they're firing at enemy players. And so they do still tend to outpaint, I think, relative to what you would think they would based on the amount of paint that they can output normally and their fire rate. This weapon is also one of the funnest in the game because you're able to get kind of 5 rolls, because you squid roll and then you do 4 dodge rolls, and then you're just zipping all over the place, man. You're just going zoom. It's a lot of fun. So there's Reborn on the other team. Reborn, former teammate of mine on Team Watercolor. So playing the Flingza, which they've been doing a lot lately. It's a very supportive weapon, so won't expect to see too much of them, although it'd be nice to be able to get in and stop them because they're going to be putting a lot of paint down. And we outrange that player, so we can just kind of kite back, and if they run into us, then they splat themselves. That player was not paying attention to where I was coming from at all, and I made the aiming task very difficult for them by going back and forth subtly. That's one down, and there's another one over here. We're able to get them. I said we were going to be feeding and dying a lot. I think there's a little bit of a commentator's curse, because we're doing really well right now. Excuse me. So we're in a pretty decent sharking position. Now, wave breakers are the bane of Dualie's existence because having to jump prevents you from using your turret mode. Dualies stay really grounded, and so running into that is not the greatest for us. Inkvacs are not as big of a concern because if you get on top of the Inkvac user, you can just cross them up. And that should be game. #1 Zone Inker. I keep getting that, and that's really surprising to me. I feel like I spent more of that game in the enemy team's base than I did anywhere near the zone. Alright. So that moves us away from the aggressive dualies. These 3 weapons are very Slayer-oriented. And that moves us into these more midline weapons. These are not necessarily weapons that are going to be avoiding fights or anything like that. They're not really supports, but they will be generally somewhat slower kill times, and they want to use their range, because these weapons have a good deal more range than the others do. We'll start out with the Gloogas. These are the less competitively used dualies of the bunch. They are a very slow fire rate, and that's the big issue with these ones. So the Gloogas work a little bit differently than other dualies, in that if you fire dual reticle mode, it 3 shots. But if you dodge roll, it 2 shots. They actually increase in damage when you dodge roll. So that is a really nice feature of them, because 2-shotting is pretty nice in this game. The thing is, though, the fire rate is very slow. Tap, 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 tap. Like, compare that for a second to this. That is just incomparably slower. And that makes the Glooga Dualies in particular very aim-intensive, because missing even a single shot increases your kill time drastically. One nice thing that this weapon does have is a splash wall. This was a very similar kit to the Glooga Deco's kit from Splatoon 2. And it can play also, this is an identical kit to the K-Gal from Splatoon 2, and it can play sort of similarly. The wall is just the right distance for you to roll and be behind it, but be right up next to it, which is a really nice touch, so that you can just throw this out here and roll at basically the same time, and be exactly where you want to be on the splash wall. So that's a really common tactic that you'll see. Glooga Dualies are great at taking space in open ground. They're great at skirmishing, because they can swim up to the point where they're just about to be unsafe, throw a splash wall, roll in, and now they're at pretty decent range to, you know, you can hit people from as far back here. These are fall-off shots, so those aren't doing quite as much damage, but you can see that goes pretty darn far, and you're able to be shielded while you're there, and that can make you somewhat difficult to deal with. You're not going to be able to paint as much as something like the K-Gal did, and so this is still a weaker playstyle than the K-Gal from Splatoon 2, because part of the advantage of this was that even if the opponents respected it, well, you were just able to use that time to take control of all the space around you and paint up and get the Booyah Bomb faster, and they still had to stop you somehow. Booyah Bomb is, of course, just generally a very good special, and there's basically no weapon that doesn't hate having this. It's a great initiation special, and this is a weapon that's right at about the range that would want to use it, because it's going to be not quite all the way back, and so you're going to be able to maybe see around some cover that would get in the way of other weapons, but you're comfortable enough that you're not going to get shredded in the meantime. So there are some things that are nice about it, but I think that the very one thing that makes this weapon not particularly valued in competitive play is the fire rate. I think that that is enough of a problem that you're not going to see very much of it, and the people who play it are going to be weapon specialists who are just trying to push it for its own sake. You generally just do not see top-level teams running this. I haven't seen them in the West or in Japan, so despite the fact that it has about the best kit it could ask for, and very nice range, I think that lack of paint that you're getting because of the slow fire rate and the inability to splat quickly if you're missing shots make it a bit inconsistent. Another thing about this is that since the dual reticle mode does less damage, you really need to be rolling, and so you're forced to commit in some situations where you might not want to, considering the roll is slower and the shots are slower. Let's see what we can do here. We might be able to wall them off the zone here. That'd be a nice thing to be able to do. We have to watch out for the Explo, though. Explos can hit up over walls and make life a little bit more difficult for Gloogas. Alright. So we're going to just use the wall here for the time being. Oh, I think I hit them with dual reticle fire the second time, so weren't able to get them. That's a bit of a crazy flank. I don't think I can follow up with that. What we can do here is control this area really well because we have the wall. And we're able to clear all of that out, make sure nobody's there. We're going to roll away from that and use this to survive because otherwise the Booyah, or the Explo would probably have gotten us. We're going to force them all the way back. Actually got the pick on them with that. Booyah is a really good answer to Explo. It is one of the slower moving weapons, and so it's very difficult for it to get out of the way. I want to make sure to maintain my range. We scared them there, fortunately. Oh, no, we did not. They sharked us. That was a smart play, getting around the shield like that. I was expecting them to stay behind cover over there, the way that they were running from me. We'll throw this out there. Oh, we got 2 hits, but we did not stay turret mode. See if I can get this player before I go down. Yeah. Getting the Explo is a big deal there. They paint more than me, and they're walling my teammates out of being able to push ahead. So I'll take that trade, I think. So I'm just going to set up here and try and protect the blob. The blob is... Ooh, I did not see the Nautilus coming in. That's bad awareness on my part. The blob is a useful member of the team to protect because they paint so much. And that is the name of the game in Splat Zones. Got to be able to paint. Here's a good example of how not to use a wall. If you use it on reaction, you're not going to be able to protect yourself in fights because it takes a while to deploy. We're going to threaten that, but just try and keep zone for now and shark someplace else. Ooh, this is a very dangerous jump. Thankfully, we saw the Ninja Squid ripples and were able to take that player out. I'm going to pop up here, throw this out, and then Booyah. We only need to hit him. Ah, shoot. That took too long. You can see where that could have gone better. Ooh, okay. No. I was thinking they were going to sit still, but they decided to push ahead instead. There we go. Wall should help us paint the zone a little bit here, and we do have good painting range, if not good paint. Just making sure that that player can't safely stick around over here. I'm going to try and set up and use this wall. When you get yourself into a position like that, you can use both sides of the wall for cover. If someone tries to flank the wall, you just cross it up, and now you're safe again. Now we're all in the same position here. Really want to be able to use this. We're going to pop this as well, because we're going to get shredded. Yeah, we don't have time. That's unfortunate. That's one, and we were able to time that roll so we fall off the ledge. Very nice. Ooh, we do not want to contest the Nautilus yet. We'll throw that out here and try and use that. Pop this like we're going to throw it over here, and we actually are going to throw it over here because the Expo decided to hole up in that spot. Fortunately, Nautilus is still here, and they capture the zone. see the difficulty of trying to paint the zone with this weapon. That probably gets some, I would think. Alright. We were able to hold on. Number 1 zone anchor. That seems wrong, because we had a blobber. I am a little bit blown away that I keep getting that with these weapons that aren't necessarily going to paint a lot. Like, how am I getting number 1 splat zone anchor when the Dualie Squelchers painted twice as much as I did? That boggles the mind. What were they painting, if not the zone? Well, speaking of Dualie Squelchers, this weapon is, it's going to play a lot differently from the others mechanically, because there's a technique, I'm not sure if it's an intended mechanic or if it was an exploit that was in Splatoon 2 that they just didn't remove, or that they knew it was there but left it in, but it's called jump tech. So jump tech is a way that you can get single reticle accuracy, still be basically in turret mode, while moving, specifically while jumping. The way that this works is you dodge roll and jump immediately, and you can see I still have single reticle accuracy and damage and fire rate for a little while before I hit the ground. I believe that the reason jump tech works is that if you take a look at my feet and the floor that I'm standing on, when you dodge roll with this weapon, you slide a little bit if you hold the direction. And during that slide, you get out a few shots. So you can see that during some of this roll, I'm still in single reticle mode. And I believe it is that enables you to stay in single reticle mode even if you're not sliding, even if you're jumping instead. And so what that lets you do is dodge roll, get the single reticle accuracy from the jump, and be moving and be a more difficult target to hit. And all you really have to do to set your aim a little bit is to aim at their feet so that when you jump, you're still aiming, you know, at their body. So it's not the most difficult thing to get the aim down for once you know what angle you want to aim it at. And then you can kind of kite people indefinitely doing this. They cannot get super close to you if you're doing this well. And you will be able to continue hitting them while they can't hit you if you outrange them. And you outrange most weapons. Like, this is a very long-range weapon. It's the furthest out, I would say, that you would consider a weapon being mid-range. You're starting to get into the territory of some of the short-range chargers if you go any further back than this weapon. I personally like this weapon a lot because it's useful and has really cool, interesting stuff that you can think about at every skill level. So, like, very, very beginner level, you're just learning the game and aiming is really hard. Well, this weapon's great because you can hit people from really far away, and even if you're missing a little bit on one side, you'll at least still hit them with the double reticle stuff. And so you'll see a lot of people who do stuff like this while they're fighting at lower levels. So it's got some cool utility there. Then once people learn how to dodge roll, you're able to learn how to do that, and that's some new techniques that you can learn. And then you get a little bit higher level than that, and you start trying to play at a more competitive level. You can learn jump tech and kite people with it. So, like, at a lot of different skill levels, there's something new that you can learn to mechanically do with the weapon. And I think that's something that really endears me to it. It has Splat Bomb, which is just phenomenal. It's a weapon that's never going to really hurt any kit in the game. There are obviously, going to be some weapons that prefer something over a Splat Bomb, but never anything where a Splat Bomb is going to ruin the weapon. And this weapon's no different. It can kind of sit back and chuck Splat Bombs if it wants to. It is a little bit on the ink-hungry side, and so that is one danger of throwing too many bombs, especially since you're going to want to be doing a lot of dodge rolls and shots while you're jump teching. So that eats up your ink tank pretty quickly. And if you're not careful, especially after you've thrown a bomb, you can take away your ability to do this for very long and just kind of get stuck. So you want to watch out for using it too often. And then Wavebreaker is also pretty solid for it. It's not a special that you're ever complaining about. Probably not something you're going to try and build an entire team comp around most of the time, but it is still a valuable one. And so generally just overall good kit for this weapon. It's hard to see another kit coming out that's going to be that much better than this one. So great option to try and pick up, and it's never going to be too bad for you. Generally, I think a lot of players will run a little bit of main saver on this. I am not. I'm just running LDE, but that does help a little bit with the ink efficiency problems. We'll see if I can get a good demonstration of jump tech against a live opponent here. It's not the easiest thing to do. I am not an expert at it right now. All right. See if we can get over on the right-hand side. It's nice to be able to get into a spot where I've got some open space, where I can use my range, and I can draw their attention away from the zone. That's another huge advantage of this spot. Like, I'm making this Expo not paint the zone, I'm making them shoot at me. And that's just causing us to keep the zone for longer. Now we're getting pushed a little bit, and we need to be careful we don't get closed on too badly. Oh, I would have had them if not for the ink running out. I also was hoping my teammate was looking at that. I should have this-wayed them. Positionally, I had them. It was just I ran out of ink. That's the thing that you do have to worry about a little bit. Oh, I don't like us standing in the same place here. Okay, force the Expo down. I'll just keep annoying them on this side here. I'm not even really painting the zone that much, but because I'm drawing so much attention away from it, we're able to get control. Alright, eventually got tracked down by the Explo there, but team was able to clean up by getting the sloshing machine. Unfortunately, we just didn't paint. We had numbers advantage there, so probably something we should have been able to do. It took a few shots, but we got there. Alright. And again, we're just going to try and distract here for a little bit. Putting that at my feet because I think they're rushing me. Trying to get as much paint as I can before I have to take that engagement because I knew I was almost out of it. And I was able to get enough to get a roll off and fire 4 shots, and that is all you need. Hi there, Crab Tank. You do not realize I am behind you. It's nice to be able to harass the backliners there, to be able to be a nuisance to the Explo. Because the Explo is one of their stronger painting weapons. And they also make it difficult for my team to move up. So having them under pressure applies a lot of threat. Okay, we can force him down on the zone area here. Unfortunately, there's not going to be any follow-up off of that, and I need to be careful about the sloshing machine. Yeah, I got a little bit too close to them. I was forced forward by some of the shots they fired, and I was looking for a way back to the safety of my range, but it's okay. We're just cracked, and we're going to splat everybody even though I'm down. Good stuff, team. Almost there. There we go. Let's throw this up here if we can. We cannot. And again, I'm just getting the crab to look at something other than the zone. Not doing a very good job of it, unfortunately. I was hoping I could cross it up or something. With any of these directional specials, Zinc Vacs and crab tanks and things like that, Dualies do tend to be pretty good answers in that they can just cross you up by dodge rolling. This guy is very stuck, and I'm surprised they're not dead already. Hello. That was actually kind of dangerous. Wish my teammate had kept shooting at them a little bit, because we did not have them down yet. Just giving them some paint on the way up. That's going to be easy enough. They're standing out in the open. Very nice, and that's game. That was a solid one. All right, and there you have it. The Dualies are a lot of fun. Definitely recommend them if they seem interesting to you. The movement mechanics give you a lot of skill expression without being, you know, terribly unbalanced or anything like that. I would say in terms of viability right now, Tetras are probably the ones that are favored the most by a lot. But I would say you're seeing significant use out of everything except for maybe like the Dapples and the Gloogas. Dapples, even then, you know, you do see in some places, but they're very niche. They're very specific to, you usually only see them in Rainmaker. So they're not a weapon that I would one-trick, but they're definitely not useless, I would say, is the way that I will charitably put it. They definitely can do some things, and if your team is ready to play around that and play at their pace, you can put together a really fun, interesting team comp that involves dying a lot, but being rats that live in their walls and are difficult to get out. And then the Gloogas, like we talked about, low fire rate, low pain output. They do midline crossfire well, but so does the Squeezer, which also has a wall. And so it's kind of competing for that in its niche. If you want a Booyah Bomb on a midline weapon, you're probably going to go with the Sloshing Machine instead. It's going to get it faster, and it has better synergy with the main weapon is just generally a little bit better, and it has really good synergy with the Fizzy Bomb, which is also a really good sub, so a little bit more aggressive poking potential, a little more versatile. But even so, you know, all very usable weapons and a lot of fun. And if you're interested in them, go check them out right now. That's an order. I'm ending the video. Thank you. Bye.